Okay, welcome back to Breakfast Daily. Now it's time for the news review segment for today. And once again, remember the hashtag is Breakfast Daily on all social media platforms and the WhatsApp line 0550-585-832. And we'll start off with the Daily Graphic this morning.
Yes, the Daily Graphic says, China-Africa relations. It is not colonialism. President tells UN General Assembly. Health Ministry increases prices of NHIA medicines. That story is on page 16. Melania Trump visits Ghana next week. I don't know how that story is on page 2. Maybe we're excited
very indifferent.
to see it. I'm like Melania.
Very indifferent to
this is Ghana. We'll be excited for her.
Yeah.
Obinim, 2 others fined 12,000 for flogging. That story is on page 23. I will say it's not every day that our pastors get fined, so this is an interesting one. Local banks will bounce back. This is coming from Esiedu Mante, and that story is on page 16 of the Daily Graphic.
Now, the Ghanaian Times says, at the UN General Assembly, aid charity not working for us. President raps global leaders. Interesting story there, and it's on page 16 of the Ghanaian Times this morning, so do take a read. Also, cocoa board to cut down 700,000 hectares of diseased cocoa trees. Page 17 has that story here. You can see the quality control manager for cocoa board, Mr. Isaac Yalpong. He had this to say. Police grants Collins Dowda bail. The full story is on page 3. We dealt with that story yesterday. And also, Giba to MOC, abrogate Star Times China deal. Interesting. This happened yesterday.
That's the Ministry of Communication.
Yeah.
Okay, now let's take a look at the Daily Statesman. Manso Nkwanta Shooting Incident Committee submits report. That story is on page 3. Reform to meet present needs. That's coming from our president, and he's telling the UN. That story is on page 2. And U.S. to fight China with 60 billion agency. This is an interesting one. There's this whole world power fight going on.
Interesting.
We'll see who wins.
Now let's see what the Daily Heritage has for us. It says here that Western chiefs burn tires over bad roads, broken promises. Anyway, Obinim convicted after pleading guilty. Fine 4,800 cedis. 2 others get 3,600 cedis each.
I think this is a major one that the chiefs are doing this.
Yeah.
This is good.
Very, very. It's sad actually that this is happening. So Obinim has been fined 4,800 cedis, and I thought fines were supposed to be punishments, but 4,800 I don't think is punishment enough.
You think he should have been fined
I think he's
more?
making a lot more money, and then he should have been fined.
But you don't get
more.
fined based on how much you're making.
No, a fine is a punishment. It's a penalty.
Anyway, so you check. But it says here 12,000 in the Daily Graphic.
No, for all.
Okay, but only him, just 4,000. I think you will even pay off the 12.
Anyway, now let's see. Wood World Mission cuts sword for 1.5 million Ghana cedis vocational and technical school complex in Akufo-Addo. And also MC defies court order, carries out demolition of shops at La Paz. So that's what is contained here. But before we go on, I think Daily Heritage has put out a form of correction. It says, the Daily Heritage, your authoritative newspaper, in its Monday, September 24 edition, mistakenly published DDT in its banner headline instead of DTT. That was interesting.
That was a terrible mistake. I hope whoever misled the Daily Heritage
we sincerely apologize for the typographical error. So yes, we noticed and we apology accepted.
Yeah, we all make mistakes, but you don't make mistakes on a headline like that. You get on a front page.
Everyone
so
can make mistakes.
You get suspension. Okay. It's fine. I think it's fair. If we're asking our leaders to be suspended, then journalists also should be suspended for not doing their due diligence. Okay, Business and Financial Times. Savings and loans firms are next. That's coming from BOG. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but they are next. Our museums are a national disgrace. Story on page 2, and I think you would agree with me, Wilberforce, because Ghana is really the brand Africa, so we should have.
I feel I have more things in my room than the Kwame Nkrumah Museum,
which is sad
because
you
really
don't have
sad.
Much in your room. I'm joking. You have
I'll do with you off air. Okay.
Okay, government considers single product industrial enclave. That's coming from the Deputy Minister of Trade, Honorable Carlos Ahenkwa. And that story is on page 2 of the Business and Financial Times.
Okay. Now, government targets $10 billion bond by December. And the full story is on page 3. Also, will pull Ghana out of poverty. The president makes this bold claim. And I see it doing Ketia. Others loot NDC campaign funds. Interesting story.
Okay, now the New Crusading Guide. We are not interested in becoming a burden on others. That's coming from the president, and that story is on pages 3 and 10. Togo opposition leader on hunger strike. Pickets at Ghana High Commission. Foreign minister holds talk with Premier of St. George. So those are the stories in the New Crusading Guide.
Now let's take a look at the Today newspaper. The Today newspaper says, "I resolve wage agbawe boundary dispute." The MC assures. So Patrick Kofi Brakonkumo happens to be the MC of wage agbawe. Also, campaign funds went to wrong people. The former president of the Republic himself is saying this.
He was preaching. I watched a video of him preaching. It was really interesting.
Okay. Well, the U.S., there's also another story. A U.S.-China trade war can hurt Ghana. Akufo-Addo says this on page 3 on the Today newspaper. And finally, government poised to improve lot of Ghanaians. Interesting.
Okay, now let's take a look at the Chronicle and then we'll do some online stories. Minority absolves Baumia, suspects intention of sabotage. That story there on pages 2 and 3. Wassa chiefs repeat Rawlings' era history. Wassa chiefs repeat Rawlings' era history. Thank you. Ghana doesn't want to be a burden on others. That's coming from our president, and he said that at the UN.
Okay. Now, finally, let's go to some online stories. I'm going to read from citynewsroom.com. It says, China relations necessary, but we must learn from history. And we'll be touching on this story and similar stories shortly. NADMO's appointees frustrating my work. Martin Amidu himself says this, according to a report on citynewsroom.com. Now, another story here says, Giba to meet Parliament today over Star Times. And finally, financial sector problems won't end soon. An economist has this to say. Now, I want to look at the story also over here. It says, NADMO stores manager suspended over expired food items. So that's what we have for you this morning on citynewsroom.com. And I'll just introduce our guest for today. We are joined by the Honorable Member of Parliament for Sekondi, Honorable Andrew Mercer. Good morning. Welcome to Breakfast Daily.
Good morning, my brother.
How are you?
Always a pleasure. I'm good. Yeah.
It's always good to have you here.
Sure. Thanks.
We're also joined by the former
Deputy
Minister for Communications, Felix Kwakye Ofosu, joins us here this morning on Breakfast Daily. Good morning.
Good morning.
It's our first time having you.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you.
Now, we'll start off with our first story.
Yes.
China-Africa relations. It's not colonialism. Remember, once again, the hashtag is Breakfast Daily on all social media platforms, and the WhatsApp line 0550-585-832.
Yes, so I'm going to read from page 3 of the Daily Graphic. It says, China-Africa relations, it is not colonialism. And that's coming from our president. And it was part of his speech at the UN headquarters in New York yesterday. So I'm going to quote him briefly and then we have a conversation. He says, we do not think that a nation needs to remain poor or become poor for others to become prosperous. We believe that there is room and that there are enough resources on this planet for all of us to be prosperous. He goes on to say that we will shoulder our own responsibilities and build societies and nations that will be attractive to our youth. We have the necessary sense of enterprise, creativity, innovation, and hard work to engineer this transition. Hence our vision of a Ghana beyond aid, indeed of an Africa beyond aid. Now, Honorable, I'll start with you. The President is not saying anything new. Indeed, Nkrumah said this in his time, right? But we see a lot of foreign interest in our country, and we're always wondering, right? Some people may say we've gone through colonization, we've gone through neo-colonialism, and how do we ensure that we are not being recolonized? So I think that's what the president is trying to address here. So if you can touch a bit on that. On the one hand, we're saying Ghana be on aid. On the other hand, we're seeing a lot of foreign interest. So how do we ensure that we stay on our own?
Well, good morning once again to your good self and, of course, to my very good friend Felix. I haven't seen him in a while. Of course, I don't think there's any inconsistency at all in what the president is saying. And of course, if you read the story, he clearly cited examples of the role that the West itself played in China's transformation in the 20th century. And clearly, that did not constitute colonization. In fact, the port of Hong Kong was leased by the British for 99 years. And like he said, the rest is history. Okay, indeed, when China began its reform and open up policy in December 1978, and thankfully for the past 2 weeks or so, I had the privilege of joining a parliamentary delegation at the invitation of the Chinese government to go to China to, as it were, try and understand where they are coming from and where they're going. And it was an interesting trip. I mean, if you look at what it is that they've been able to do between 1978 and today, you will marvel. Of course, I had gone to China previously for business and didn't really have the time to listen to attend seminars that clearly explain where it is that they were only 40 years ago when they were an extremely poor country and what it is that they've been able to do within this period. And the people who funded primarily that transformation is the West. When they commenced their reform and open up policy, they opened up because prior to that they were a closed society, you know, where the land ownership and all that were state controlled. But they took a decision that, look, socialism is good, but we needed some additional impetus by adopting some market principles to ensure that our development agenda is achieved. And that's exactly what they did. Opened up, allowed private sector players to come in, foreign direct investment to come in. They took loans, they took bonds, and all the things that they did. And with focused leadership and extremely hard work. Because it didn't come on a silver platter. And so if they have gotten to where they are, and one of the key principles that underlies their Belt and Road Initiative is benevolence. They think that, look, if we prosper and others do not prosper, clearly the lack of synergy in itself is not good for their own well-being. Okay, and so it is important for them to help everybody prosper so that they also can prosper more.
So you're coming to Africa to help us prosper?
Of course. The West went there to help them to prosper. Absolutely.
Okay.
And so opening up, and because of the wealth that they've generated over the years, assisting, of course. And you see, I always say that is important because they are business people. They want money. They're not coming here to do charity, but they have the funding to support that in some development agenda.
So
it's important that
just
we
ask
negotiate better to get better value for whatever engagements that we have with them. Isn't this interesting? That when the West have begun to realize that, look, the Chinese penetration into Africa probably may not be in their national interest, have also set up a parallel fund to try and meet them and see what it is that can be done so that their influence in Africa cannot be eroded by the Chinese penetration.
So
I think it's a good thing.
A couple of decades ago, one would say that we were on the same footing as China, and that's Africa, right? And for that nation to get to a point where they are now loaning to us, we've been saying these things since our very early days of independence. We've had Western donors come in and help us. Why have we not gotten to a point where we are also saying, let's expand? Day in, day out, you hear local businesses complaining that foreign businesses are coming in, they're getting tax breaks, we are not able to compete with them. what exactly are we doing wrong that even though you have all the writings from Arthur Lewis to Kwame Nkrumah, you have everything in the books, when you look outside and you actually live it, it does not match?
If you listen to me quite carefully, I say words. Focused leadership and extremely hard work.
We've not done that in the past?
Have we?
Are we doing that now?
I think so. Of
What's
course,
the
it takes
difference?
time. Look, you see, our entire approach at even exploitation of our resources, where we just farm them out by way of mining leases to people to pay us some pittance in terms of royalties and corporate taxes when they actually make profit, has proven not to be the best in terms of what it is that we get from our resources. So the president has said that, look, rather than that, we would partner. And that's a new paradigm, completely. We haven't done it in the past. So going forward, these are the kinds of things that government is doing to change the paradigm and enable us get more from what we get from our resources. That's different. Of course, nobody can say, and I always admit, we are building a nation. It's a process. It's not an event. So not much has been achieved over the period. But if there's a commitment, if there's a clear plan, if there's a direct focus that this is where we are going, I'm encouraged. And that is what I see on the ground today.
Fantastic. Okay. We hear from Felix on this.
Well, there are a few things that we need to take cognizance of. First of all, we have a history, a rather storied history as a continent. That was at the receiving end of colonialism for centuries. And indeed, there are many who hold the view, and it's a view I share, that our underdevelopment stems directly from that dark phase of our history. Therefore, we should be the first to be wary of any effort by any economic behemoth or any recent economic superpower to use, if you like, attractive incentives to colonize us. Now, I'm not sure how my brother comes to the conclusion that the Chinese are here for purely altruistic reasons and that they are here only because they want us to prosper. And that stems from a philosophy that says that...
To be fair, he also said they are
yes,
here for business as
yes,
well.
but
And
that,
they'll be
he made
expecting...
those are two separate points. There's nothing wrong with coming to do business. But he made the point that the principle of philosophy that underlines China's expansion into territories like Africa is born out of a belief that we need to prosper in order for them to safeguard their prosperity. If I'm not mistaken, that's the impression that I got from his submission. I beg to differ. Look, they are not here because they want us to prosper. They are here to extend influence. They are here to compete with other global superpowers who, over the years, they feel have dominated them. And in recent times, if you look at some of the offerings that they've placed on the table for us, some of the dealings that they've engaged in with us, it is clear that the mindset of colonialism is there. I am not saying that there's anything wrong, even if we detect that there's that element to their foreign policy or there's that element to the push that they are making towards us. We cannot devise ways to derive the maximum benefits out of it whilst ensuring that we do not fall prey to the overall agenda. Look at this recent StarTimes saga, for instance. It has all the trappings of colonialism. To enter some agreements to obtain about $2 billion in the Sino-Hydro deal. And underlining that it's an insistence from the Chinese that give a particular contract to a company, otherwise you are not getting that money. I can assure you, no, it is not. It is not. Look, with a greater respect to all of you here, I happen to have been in government, and I'm telling you on authority that because we abrogated that StarTimes deal, it affected some monies that we were supposed to get from China. I'm telling you on authority, as someone who sat in government, who sat in meetings and engaged with Chinese authorities. Would it not rather be the 19 billion Exim Bank loan facility instead of the 2 billion? I think that 19 billion loan is not coming. Let us be frank with ourselves. There's been no mention of it since the vice president went to China and a song and a dance was made about it. I'm talking about the 2 billion. I'm not talking the 19 billion. Why? Actually, your information minister, Mr. Mustafa Hamid, at the time, former information minister, I must say, it's on record to have said that that money was coming in August. He said that by August the money would be here. Parliament would go through agreements to approve them and have the monies delivered to us. He's on record. You can Google it. The vice president was clear. He said he had put together a package of $19 billion from China and broke it down. $2 billion for the AGI, some $3 billion from the CDB, and others that he said we're going to go into other sectors. So I don't know how come my good friend is disputing that fact. But the point I'm making is that they have tied that Star Times deal to some money that they are expecting from China. It is the reason why, despite the abundance of evidence that that deal is not in our interest, it is being pushed. I am not saying that on the Chinese side there's anything particularly wrong with it. They have every right to devise a foreign policy. They have every right to come up with measures that ensure that they extend their influence beyond their own borders. The onus is on us to stand firm and insist that the right things are done by us. Again, the attempt to create the impression that suddenly a certain new paradigm has come into being and now we are doing things much better than in the past is quite misleading. And I'm sure he was referring to the Sino-Hydro deal once again, where a Chinese company will come here, mine our bauxite, transform it into aluminium ingots and export it to China for it.
Nobody has said so.
But that is exactly what
you guys are reading your own script written by yourself.
No. I think that the interruption is
that
unfortunate.
appears to be.
You see, first of all, aluminium ingot is only a semi-finished product. It is not the final product. Okay. So the idea that it is the first time in our history that we are going to have raw materials processed into something more useful is misleading. The second point is that it is not the first time that the government of Ghana has engaged China in a transaction like that. What we are talking about is an exact replica of what we did with the CDB facility, where we sold them oil. They gave us an entity to build a gas processing plant for us to process gas, which we use to fire our thermal plants to produce electricity. If you look at the details of that transaction, it simply said that they will advance us $3 billion, or in the specific case of the Trouble gas plant, they will give us $1 billion. We will use that to build the gas plant, and we will sell oil, put it in an escrow account. They will take their share of the money, and we get the rest. That is exactly what they have done. When the people come here and mine bauxite and convert it into alumina, which is a semi-finished product, I must stress, it will be sold, the money will be put into an escrow account, they take their share, we take our share. Nothing innovative about that. Yet it is being trumpeted as something significantly new. And that is a difficulty I have with some of the rhetoric that the president engages in. Look, China as an entity will not come and put their money into developing countries like ours simply because they want us to prosper. There is something in it for them. And indeed, if you look at the sort of agreements that they have insisted that we enter into, they have been so rigid as to insist on every peso. You can take a look at the CDB facility agreement. At a point, they insisted that we show them exactly how we were going to be able to pay. Our oil was not enough, so we had to promise them additional LPG and other products. That was how come that loan took so long in coming. I can tell you that this $2 billion that they are hankering after, for which an impression is being created that it will come tomorrow, will take quite a while to come. The sort of effort that you need to put in to even get bauxite out of the earth and process into the alumina they are talking about is no child's play. Again, if you look at the entire government communication around this matter, they create the impression that the be-all and end-all of Ghana's development in the next 2 years under their government is this $2 billion facility. When in other instances,
respectfully, I don't think he said that.
No, I'm not saying that's what he said. Okay. I'm speaking in broad terms about the posture of government. Okay. And that is discernible from the vice president's statements. It is discernible from the president's statement. Why? The vice president was in Tamale earlier this week, and he cited that agreement as one of the achievements. The agreement that is on paper, that we've not gotten a dime for. He cited it as an achievement. If you listen to them and the sort of things that they are saying about that transaction, it means that their entire existence and success as a government is tied to the benevolence of a country called China. And I find that particularly worrying. It is true that China has vast amounts of money. I understand that they are currently the largest investor in the US economy, and they invest in other markets also. But it is imperative, because of our past experiences, to be careful how we deal with them and not create the impression that we are willing to bend over backwards and do anything they ask, only so that we can lay hands on some Chinese facility to embark on one project or the other. We have an experience as a country that we need to be mindful of. Okay. So those of us who have been in government before and have dealt with the Chinese are in a position to caution against the sort of excitement that is being generated by this sort of agreements. They are not benevolent agreements. They are certainly not born out of charity, and they are definitely not born out of a desire to see us prosper as part of a fundamental Chinese philosophy. It is purely business. And if you go into it, you find that in most cases it is lopsided, as is the case with the Star Times deal, which they have tied
Okay,
to
so
that particular law.
since you've been in power before,
Yeah.
do you think that our leaders, when we go to the negotiation table with other countries, we are able to negotiate and put Ghana's interest first?
Look, there has been a long-standing criticism that we have not...
From your experience,
Yes.
since you've
That-
been...
no,
you've been there.
it's a long-standing debate. It predates us. I'm sure that it
Felix.
goes even beyond that. But they have come under criticism. I have criticized them for
but
aspects of the
in
deal
your
that they
experience,
engaged in. But I'm making
did
the
we
point
serve
that there's a
Ghana's
long-standing debate about the quality of negotiations that we engage in. Several factors account to that. First of all, we don't go to those negotiation tables in a position of strength. We often go there cap in hand. What do you call it? Invariably, the other party that we engage are in a position of strength. They have the money. For instance, they need $2 billion to do a number of things. So you go to the negotiation table and they tell you that if you don't give this company this loan, you are not getting it. It may not appear in your documents or in the papers that you present, but they will tell you that. And you are
But you can use examples from your
term. Look, we were
Okay.
confronted with that Star Times matter. That's why I've told you. I've come out to tell you this. If you speak to my boss, Dr. Manibuama, he will tell you that we were confronted with that prospect. That if you don't give this contract to this particular company, you are not getting this other agreement.
But you actually signed the Star Times contract and proceeded to terminate and use other funds to build the DTT project.
We did.
So why are we doing this?
Respectfully, let him
It's not the truth.
Let him
No,
we'll
say
come
it.
back to you.
Let him
We'll
finish.
come
You
back
have
to
a chance
you.
to
Again,
speak
my
on
friend
it.
does not want to accept
Please
the reality.
just make notes.
Look, we terminated that Star Times contract. When
Why
we
did you
realized-
sign it in the first place?
Because we signed it because we did a competitive process. It was a bidding. People were asked to put in bids to execute the project. A company called Star Times Ghana put in a bid also. After it was evaluated, their bid was found to be the most responsive to the various criteria that we had laid down. We then agreed with them that for an amount of $95 million, they ought to put in place this DTT infrastructure over a specific period. After 1 year, they did not perform. We extended it by a year, they did not perform. So we terminated it in accordance with Ghanaian and international law.
Okay.
It is the reason why we won all the cases that they took to court. We abrogated it, we opened a new tender process. A Ghanaian entity won, executed the project to up to 90%, and there is an astounding 10% to be done. You have gone back to the same entity that failed to execute the project in the first place, and are asking them to come and expand the infrastructure that has been laid when no such expansion is required in any event. All you require is to top up the amounts that the Ghanaian company used to finish up the project and roll it out. So that cannot be an excuse or a defense for the criticism that I'm leveling at you. I'm saying that you are placing too much hope and confidence in an arrangement that is not significantly different from what we have done in the past. So be careful, tarry, so that you don't go and box yourself. Why? At a point, we had to cap the $3 billion that we had gone for from CDB because we were making demands that were outrageous. We
Because you did not make the conditions precedent.
Because those conditions.
Simple. You went in with your eyes open.
I think that you are
Okay,
heckling
you are
us.
not-
you are not
Please.
No, but I'm telling you
We'll
that
get to
Actually,
you.
Andrew,
We'll get
you said
to
You
the
guys are not
conditions
asking
were
the critical
outrageous.
question.
We
No,
are
that-
asking
you said the
them.
conditions
What are you talking about?
We are asking him the
We are not
question.
sitting here.
Honorable
We
Mercer,
are
yes,
asking
Honorable
the
Mercer,
Mercer,
please.
please,
Honorable
you have a
Mercer,
chance.
You're
I think you
not
are necessarily
allowing
worked
us.
up.
You're not
But the point is
allowing us asking the
that
question.
the point is that the disruptions will not stop me from making my fundamental point. I am saying that you are making too much noise about a transaction that is not extraordinary. When we examine the terms of this arrangement with the Chinese, it is not different significantly beyond the fact that you say bauxite to be converted through various processes into aluminum ingots. That, I'm telling you, is not extraordinary.
Okay.
We
It's
have
similar to
given
the
the oil
CDB facility.
and gotten
Okay.
money to
Thank
process
you.
gas before.
Thank you.
So
Thank you.
let us be
Break.
careful. Let us not misplace confidence
Okay.
in
Okay.
the Chinese arrangement, and let us
You
not
just
go
don't
in
want
with the
enough
mindset.
funds to come.
Let
Thank
us
you.
That is why you went to the IMF.
We'll continue the
Because
conversation.
raising all
We'll
sorts of
be
issues
right
and now you have
back.
Thank you very much.
Honorable Mercer,
We'll be right back.
Honorable Mercer, when we come back,
We'll
you
be
have
right
the
back.
chance to
You don't want to
respond.
take
So
the
that's
audience
fine.
on
You see, why you don't
CCTV.
recognize?
We'll take a quick break. We're discussing the president saying that Ghana's relationship with China is not colonialism. This is Breakfast Daily. Let us know your thoughts with the hashtag Breakfast Daily and the WhatsApp line 0550-585-832. We'll be right back.
It's engaging, detailed, and loaded with factual and incisive analysis. It's The Big Issue, your preferred Saturday morning news and current affairs analysis program on City TV. Tune in this and every Saturday at 9 a.m. and hear the newsmakers discuss the top issues for the week.
At that time, Charlotte was complex. I'm not defending Charlotte. I'm talking about the way we behave like hypocrites and ostriches in this country. At that time, she was a perfect person.
It's The Big Issue with Stella Madonu on City TV. This and every Saturday at 9 a.m.
Back to Breakfast Daily Story News Review segment for today. We shall be reading your messages shortly, so keep them coming. Hashtag Breakfast Daily. And of course, the WhatsApp line 0550-585-832. We are wrapping up on the US-China Ghana-China relations, and also
the president saying that
it's not colonialism.
Yeah, because I think some people were worried that we might be getting recolonized, and it's not just Ghana; the whole of Africa might be recolonized by China. So this comes in. But let's get your closing
any
statement.
commercial arrangement with anybody constitute colonialism? How? We sat here in this country when we were told that our sovereignty has been sold to the USA for the military cooperation agreement that we have gone to execute. Are we a sovereign state as we sit here? You see, when people want to put spokes, in a certain wheel that clearly is heading in a direction that will be beneficial for the people of Ghana, purely for political gain, let us be sincere to admit that that's politicking. Look, this Star Times transaction that he mentioned has absolutely nothing to do with the 2 billion Sino-Hydro facility. None whatsoever. The issues have been explained quite clearly by the ministers involved in there, and I don't want to belabor the point by going back to re-argue this matter. But you see, the CDB facility, he sat in government, and it's true. The money was not disbursed fully because after they terminated the engagements that President Akufo has started with the Equatorial Guinea people to build the processing plant, and they realized that this 3 billion was not coming, President Mills had to go and negotiate strongly for an exemption to the fulfillment of all the conditions President attached to the 3 billion loan, to enable us build Atuabu, because if we hadn't done so and first oil from Jubilee came, we're going to have a huge problem. So the Chinese gave us some concession to do the 1 billion and disbursed those funds, but insisted on every single condition that we, a government, had agreed prior to disbursement of the remainder of the amount. We did not meet them. Simple. So the funds did not come,
Okay. Now,
but
I want
with this Sino-Hydro transaction, Sino-Hydro is not the entity that is going to mine our bauxite. They are not. Government has gone into a master facility agreement with them to do projects for us that have been costed by us, on the premise that, look, we need this infrastructure. Our intention is to go into a joint venture to process these our bauxite, and that when we do, we'll be able to pay you.
Yes.
Can you build this infrastructure for us
2 billion. Okay.
so that when we process our bauxite, we can give you a value of that equivalent to how much you've given us, together with the cost that you incurred in raising the funding to build those projects.
Okay, Honorable, thank you. I'll have to end you on that
please,
one.
Please, it's important. No, just a second.
I don't want
I'll be done. It was important for us to know the cost that Sino-Hydro was going to incur for the facilities that they were going to take to build those projects. And so those conditions were contained in the document. Quickly, they ran to the IMF that we were going to borrow
Honorable,
put it in the nature
you have taken
of a
discussion to
World
a
Bank has come
Sino-Hydro
back and say, hey,
discussion.
we reviewed it.
Okay.
thoroughly studied it by our legal team.
Honorable,
This
thank you very
cannot
much.
be classified
Now, I want us to
as
talk
a loan.
about,
Thank you.
There's a
Thank
story
you.
on citynewsroom.com that says NADMO stores manager suspended over expired food items. Now, reading it says the National Disaster Management Organization has suspended its regional stores manager, Amin Suleimana, following the distribution of some expired food items to victims in the Upper West region. And public relations officer for NADMO, George A.C., who made this known on Eyewitness News, further indicated that NADMO's Upper West regional director had been queried over the incident. So according to this report, a committee had been set up and trying to bring a finality to the issue or the cause of the problem. But in the interim, the stores manager has been suspended. I'll start with you, Felix, on this particular story.
Well, it's been a year to forget for our vice president, hasn't it? I mean, from a position of being seen as an economic messiah, he now has to contend with the supply of expired products to people who are already in distress. But I think you should teach him a lesson in humility, that we are all human. And so we have failed. Mistakes happen. Errors occur. The way that he stood on platforms and bashed others and called others names, you would expect that he would be superhuman. There will be absolutely no hitch or glitch with anything that he touches. But it appears that he who is a self-acclaimed avid reader who reads everything and accused others of not reading could not read the labels on products that he was distributing, and so distributed expired products to people who already were distressed because they had been victims of a flood. But on a more serious note, it shows that there's some deficiency in the management of the movement of the vice president. Because originally, this would be an activity that NADMO will carry out. So the vice president will only go to headline it as a prominent government official, perhaps to show that government is concerned about the plight of the individuals. So he went basically to hijack what NADMO already was going to do. But because he's the vice president and a prominent figure, he does not just zoom into a program and take it over. There must be an advanced team. There must be some arrangement. There must be protocol officials and other aides of his who will check that everything was in order. People had to liaise with NADMO to find out exactly what items are being given, what's the nature of the items that are being given, and whether or not they are wholesome. Because you don't want the vice president's name to be associated with anything that would generate a sort of controversy that it has generated. It appears that there was a lapse. And rather than being defensive, I would hope that steps should be taken to beef up the quality of personnel in the vice president's office who can detect this. The small things matter. People think that presidents just move. It is not the case. You need people who do reconnaissance, people who go to the venue to ensure that everything is ordered, people who go there to mount security arrangements to ensure the safety of the vice president. I think that more senior persons ought to take responsibility for this matter rather than just victimizing the Upper West regional director
Stores manager
of NADMO. I think that the blame should go much further than that. Even people at the vice president's office ought to take the flak for this. Yes, absolutely. Of course, the vice
even though
president
NADMO has taken responsibility.
Yes, but I'm saying that it is not an entirely NADMO affair. Because when the vice president went there, the headline said the vice president had donated relief items to the victims. NADMO was not mentioned beyond perhaps a passing sentence or two to indicate that they were the ones who would have arranged it. But the vice president went there because he wanted to hog the headlines to show that on behalf of the president, government was giving some relief items to the people. Why did he go? If NADMO could do it, why did the vice president have to go? He went because he wanted his name and the office of the presidency to be associated with that particular activity. For that reason, there are people who are paid with the taxpayers' money, 998 of them at the presidency and elsewhere, who are supposed to ensure that things run smoothly and effectively. So it is not sufficient to punish low-level officials in NADMO and leave middle-level officials and even high-level officials at NADMO and people at the vice president's office. It is a responsibility that they must take. Okay. One of the things that we don't do is to exact high standards of performance. This is a monumental embarrassment to the vice president and, by extension, the government. And I think that in addressing the situation, they are picking on low-level personalities. At the very least, the vice president's brother-in-law is a number 2 man at NADMO. There is a number 1 man at NADMO. And if the arrangements are such that a regional director or a stores manager in the Upper West can decide to keep on wholesome products when they were fully aware that those products had expired and could be injurious to the health of people who consume. Indeed, there have been reports that about 2 or 3 people have been hospitalized because they consumed the products that were distributed to them. That is human health that has been compromised. For that reason, you don't limit the punishment to.
Well, the explanation given was that it was subject to an internal audit. They need to. The internal auditor needs to come and ascertain that the products are really gone bad before they dispose of them.
Yes, but surely there must be some mechanism
and
to isolate.
Set up a committee
yes,
to investigate
that is standard procedure. But the point I'm making is that pending the internal audits, those products have to be isolated so that you don't get mixed up with the wholesome ones to result in the scenario that we are discussing at the moment. So it is not an excuse. What it simply means that there are serious deficiencies in the way that NADMO operates. And there are serious deficiencies too in the Vice President's office in terms of how they are able to liaise with other agencies to ensure that the Vice President participates in activities like this. Elsewhere, this would have brewed a huge storm because we are talking about human lives. I don't know to what extent, and my brother here is a lawyer, he perhaps can advise us, whether or not the victims of this donation can bring some, if you like, legal proceedings against the state and sue for some recompense. Because their health has been undermined. They were sitting there somewhere, as we say in our balance, when you brought them some food, which has undermined their health. So I'm not impressed with the level of punishment that has been exacted.
You see, I yesterday, as usual, my very good senior lecturer put the issues in proper perspective. And rather than playing political chaskili, made it quite clear, like Felix is doing here this morning. An embarrassing situation, by all means. I mean, and I agree for the Vice President to have been associated with the presentation of a wholesome product to Ghanaian citizens who were distressed. It's not something that we can sit here and attempt to defend. But you see, in one breath, he himself says that a state institution who is responsible for providing relief to Ghanaians in distress, they were the custodians of the items, and to show government's empathy, because the Vice President himself was already in the northern region, attending the policy summit, went there to lead the presentation of the items. And so, clearly, failure of institutional framework. Yet, he is attributing the figure, or if you like, the front row position that the Vice President took to ascribe some blame to his office. Yesterday, when I heard that the store's manager had been suspended indefinitely, I thought it was not far-reaching enough. But then again, upon subsequent reflection, I felt that maybe because he was directly in control of the stock, because the stores are where these things are kept, he is the one who ought to have proper inventory of the expiry date of all these products that were in his custody. And so, yes, asking him to step aside and going further to do some investigation to find out where the lapses were. Maybe subsequently some other people who ought to be held responsible ought to be held responsible. And I think that it's the way to go. If people, slack in the performance of their duty for which we pay them, some sanction ought to follow. And if the investigation finds out that, sanctions ought to be taken all the way up to the top, including the leadership of NADMO, by all means, and why not? At least, unlike in previous times where people who were found culpable of some wrongdoing were promoted into the office of the president, some action has been taken. And for me, it's gratifying. And I think that, like he said, he ought to go all the way, full stretch. Nobody should be protected. Because embarrassment, I think, was uncalled for.
Okay, fantastic.
But if I may correct an impression, I mean, this claim that people were promoted for wrongdoing,
some were also prosecuted.
Completely business.
Okay.
The only president in the history of the Fourth Republic who has put a member of his party on trial is President Mahama. That is something President Akufo-Addo will never be able to do, and I can state it on authority.
The sports minister under President Akufo, who was tried, was not a member of government.
He was a member of the PNC.
Was he a member of government?
Party, a member of his party. That's a serious distinction. He was dispensable as a member of the PNC.
Now, just to move on to this particular story, reading from page 3 of the Today newspaper, campaign funds went to the wrong people. Former President John Dramani Mahama says, or has revealed, that campaign funds and logistics failed to get to the right people. Hence, the National Democratic Congress's heavy loss in the 2016 general election. The NDC, led by Mr. Mahama, lost by almost 1 million votes, the heaviest in the Fourth Republic. However, Mr. Mahama addressing party supporters at Bojase in the Utusenya West constituency in the Central region on day 1 of his 4-day tour of the region, said the party lost the election because campaign funds and logistics did not get to the grassroots. So President Mahama has, launched his campaign. The tour is dubbed Itinerary for JM's Campaign Tour in
Central region.
Yes.
So, and let me quote him briefly. He says, "I have noted all our mistakes. We realized campaign funds were diverted, but we have learned our lesson. We will ensure campaign funds go through the right channel to get the campaign done. In 2020, we must rise up and be vigilant. I am confident that at the end of the polls, NDC will be declared winner."
Okay. So the campaign has
the diversion of the funds in the Kwesibujo report.
Well, is it the fact
let us do the question?
Is it the fact?
Thank you.
Well, is it the fact that at least we even those who were victors in the election set up a committee under the chairmanship of Mr. Akufo to look into the elections and make recommendations on how they can correct whatever lapses may have occurred. The victory may have masked
or consolidate the game.
Yeah, but the victory may have masked some lapses, which may not become apparent because everybody is in a joyful mood and what have you. So the very idea of carrying out is something that all serious organizations should do. We lost an election, but I did not expect it. So surely something may have gone wrong, both internally and externally. So when we set up a committee to look into those, we're only being pragmatic and taking the right step. It shows an organization that is serious and that wants to make progress.
But even after some temporary and set up a committee does not show
Honorable, you have the chance to.
But the point is that there have been several complaints from various levels of the party about the management of campaign resources and logistics. There have been accusations of misapplication. Others have alleged that some held on to it and did not release it and all that. The duty of leadership of the party is to look into those accusations and take remedial measures. And that is precisely what we have done. And that is what President Mahama has spoken to. Let me take the opportunity to correct a false publication that came out yesterday. You read it in your review of the headlines. There was a report that said that President Mahama had mentioned Mr. Asiedu Nketia and accused him of some diversion. That is completely false. Mr. Mahama did not do anything of the sort. There's a fake news portal called Join Newsroom, and it is important that yes, but that is what it is. I mean,
don't say
no,
that. You can't do that here.
No, I'm not advertising them, but it is important.
But you should also talk badly about.
No, I'm not. But you see, when a portal emerges out of the blue and deliberately carries false stories, it is nothing more than a fake news.
Ghana politics online.
There's a difference between getting a story wrong, perhaps being misinformed by a source, and getting it wrong, and deliberately setting out to put out falsehood to achieve a certain political objective. That is what that portal does. So it is important that we caution the public against taking what they say seriously.
Thank you.
So that is why I did that disclaimer. It is not because I wanted to discredit anybody.
That's okay.
No,
there are portals and newspapers that are
hostile. Let's move from portals and focus on
we don't have a
the
campaign.
And there are none that are hostile to the NPP.
But the point is that we are doing a necessary reorganization. President Mahama has stepped out at a time when Ghanaians have come to the realization that this NPP government was only about deception. I mean, it's about fraud, no substance. Hardship has been imposed on the people. Promises that were made have not been kept. We have suffered major retrogression. This is a government that has no tangible offerings to give to the people of this particular country. I mean, you pick a country that has an exchange rate of 4 Ghana cedis to a dollar, and you bring it to a state where we have an exchange rate of 5.2 Ghana cedis. Look at the level at which we buy fuel now. And these were clear commitments that they made. It was not that they were sitting somewhere and said nothing. about the situation before. Why? The vice president is on record, 15th May 2015, at accusing President Mahama of being insensitive because fuel prices went up by a certain margin. Why should we applaud them when fuel prices go up now? When he's held lectures and said that if the fundamentals of the economy are weak, the exchange rate would expose you because the exchange rate had depreciated at the time, why should we not hold him responsible? Why should we not say that the fundamentals of the economy are in shambles at a time when the exchange rate has depreciated about 26%? Again, he speaks often about what this government has done and what they will do. When you compare that to what we did in the 4 years that President Mahama was president, it appears infinitesimal, completely insignificant. And I spoke about
they've not completed their term yet.
Well,
so they're just like in 2 years.
But you see, they've not completed their term. If by the middle of their term you don't see any tangible achievements, where do you derive the confidence from that in the remaining 2 years they will do anything significant? Mind you, President Mahama also had 4 years, and in the 4 years he did all the things that he did, which they dismissed as unsatisfactory. So if in 2 years you promise to build us 216 factories, and midway down the line we don't see any that you have started from scratch, but you rather go around and co-opt other people's factories and put a label of 1D, 1F on it. You promise to send $1 million to every constituency.
Public partnership,
no,
right?
No. Look, without shouting slogans, we had a program in the Free Zones Enclave that between 2013 and 2016 delivered close to 70 major factories, not the small ones that they are talking about. It gave employment to about 16,000 people and brought in $1 billion in investment. That happened without shouting. So factory building is not a new enterprise in Ghana.
I guess it started from 2013.
They made it a specific.
That's when it started, isn't it?
They made a specific promise. Indeed, they were so specific as to give timelines. President Akufo-Addo,
Thank you. We do
have 51 factories will be ready by November. Let him tell us where those 51 factories are. So they failed the country. These are the things that he's talking about.
Okay.
You see, I guess that they still think that we have a short memory. I think. Yeah, because otherwise, I don't see how Mr. Mahama would have the courage to even speak about
President Akufo-Addo has the courage to speak. President Akufo-Addo has the courage to speak.
He did not.
Symbolic performance.
He didn't intervene when you were speaking.
A government that has presided over an economy that has grown from 3.6 to in excess of 8%.
Nothing on
Cannot be a
We've
government
grown at 14% before. Nothing unheard of. It is nothing
He
unprecedented.
allows you to make your point respectfully. Please.
I mean, it's interesting how they always dismiss the Mills years in an assessment of a comparison between the two parties in government. Very interesting. So you ask them, when in 2008 they were campaigning, they made promises contained in a manifesto, which I am happy to interrogate because it's your vision. How much of the promises that were contained in your manifesto was achieved under the 4 years of Mills rule and the 4 years of John Mahama? Less than 30%. Yet, these guys are quick to say that we lied to the people of Ghana because after 2 years, we haven't achieved our campaign promises that were contained in our 2008-16 manifesto. Can you believe this?
Sure, it's believable. The promises have timelines. You promised 51 factories in
So
November
I'm
of last
asking you,
year. You don't deliver it. So you applaud.
Is
Thank
the
you very much.
quantum of promises that you attained over 8 years
Our work is there for everybody to see.
less than 30%? No,
Everybody sees it.
like Vice President Baumia said, borrowing to spend, easy.
But that's what you are doing.
Well,
You
what
are borrowing
is it?
to spend, aren't you? You borrowed 40 billion Ghana cedis in the last 2 years.
Felix,
And you spent it on
let's
things that are not
finish.
tangible.
Honorable Mercer, we are
what have
wrapping
we
up, so I
done?
want you to finish.
You see, tangibles,
Yeah.
is relative.
Nothing. You poured it into consumption.
Because
recurrent
if, of
expenditure.
course, we are impacting the lives
Dr.
of
Bamian
Felix,
Ghanaians.
let's not do
Sign
this.
of
Felix,
bad governance. He's
Felix,
on record.
let's
He's
not
on
do
record.
this.
We are
thank you.
impacting
The viewers are aware of this.
Ghanaians.
I'm only correcting
Honorable
the
Mercer.
things that he's
We are
Honorable
investing
Mercer.
in
Allow you
building
make
a
your point.
proper
Not a daddy.
database and
Not a
addressing
daddy.
system
Oh,
that
really?
clearly formalizes
Really?
this economy.
Really?
We need to fix the fundamentals. And
So
if
that's
Dr.
what you
Bamiya
put
says,
40 billion Ghana cedis in.
look, you see, government presents a budget to Parliament annually.
Yeah.
That spells out the revenue and expenditure. Now, if your MPs or you yourself have an issue with the expenditure that has been incurred that is contained in the budget, raise the issues.
But we raise them.
Where?
I've condemned you for spending
Raise
on
it
your current expenditure.
at the appropriate forum.
So,
Because as far as I'm concerned,
But this is a public
I said
forum.
appropriate.
No.
I didn't say this was not
Don't
a
get
You see,
distracted. Don't get
for me,
On recurrent expenditure.
you guys tickle yourself. You make it seem as if between your 8 years of 2009 to 2016, you built from heaven in this country.
Honorable Minister, I want you to wrap up.
You did far better than that.
Honorable Minister,
The economy is growing.
Wait,
Our foreign deposits are increasing.
Felix, you
Every
have to
single
go back to
economic
it.
indicator. In fact, consistent with your admission of incompetence, you went to the IMF to come and help
You are in China.
manage the country. We
begging
haven't
for $2
gone.
billion.
You went there to beg for 3.
Oh yes, we got it.
So,
What have
So,
you done?
and when we
It's
get
fine.
it, we'll build the
Thank
boat.
you. Thank you
No,
very
it's
much,
important.
Honorable Andrew Mercer. You're
Sorry
going
for
back
the
and
hacking.
forth
Sorry
with
for
it.
the
You're not
hacking.
making your
Honorable
closing
Minister,
argument.
you allowed
him a bit.
Thank you.
You should have stayed on
distracted.
point.
You just wish
I was just nudging him a bit, you know.
No, but
former
that's excessive.
President
No,
Oh, no, I don't have a
Donald
problem.
Just
I
wish
wish you
Mahama
well.
was
I
like
mean,
us.
yes, of course.
Okay,
I mean,
so I'll just go
Sure.
through a few messages. It seems our Facebook page has a lot of back and forth going on. As this is going on in the studios, the Facebook has a lot of back and forth as well. A message here says, okay, so Wanda is writing from in Psalm, and he says that, well, did we hear the president say that we are in difficulties but not in crisis? This government is only good grammatically, theoretically, and there's empty talk. Another message from Cindella says, wow, 998 presidential staffers, waste of public funds on family and friends. What were they doing? Okay, so other messages saying that MPP has failed, change this. Okay, anyway, another this coming from Sinella. Okay, so there's a lot of back and forth going on our page. People should just find our social the Facebook page.
Yes.
You know, City TV on Facebook.
But thank you, Honorable Andrew Mercer. He's the MP of Sekondi, and Felix Kwakye Ofosu, former Deputy Minister of Communications.
It's a great first time.
but he's drawn the lines.
Being with us, Breakfast Daily. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.